She was crawling through the Wyoming desert with two broken legs, a bone piercing through her skin, no water, no weapon, and a killer tracking her every move. 3 miles, inch by inch, dragging herself through blood and dirt under the burning sun. Why? Because somewhere to the north, a man she had never met was waiting for her, and she had made him a promise. But here's what makes this story terrifying. The man who destroyed her stagecoach, who murdered the driver, who watched her fall from the canyon rim with a cold smile, was her dead husband's brother. And he wasn't done. He followed her to the only safe place she had left, crept into her room at night, pressed his hand over her face and whispered, "When I kill you, you will see me coming." This woman survived 3 years of brutal abuse, killed to stay alive, fled across the country, and now, broken and bleeding in the wilderness, she refused to die. What happened next will stay with you long after this story ends. Welcome to Cowboy Chronicles channel, where the Wild West comes alive through stories of grit, survival, and love forged in the hardest places on earth. If dust, devotion, and untamed hearts speak to your soul, you're exactly where you belong. This story reminds us that survival is not just about staying alive. It's about choosing to keep going when every reason says stop. And sometimes the people who've been broken the most are the ones brave enough to love again. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell me, would you have kept crawling? Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe to Cowboy Chronicles so you never miss a story worth remembering. Now, let's ride. Clara Bennett pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the stagecoach window, watching the darkness of the Wyoming night swallow the world beyond. The letter in her hands had been read so many times that the paper had gone soft as cotton, the creases threatening to tear with each unfolding. 50 more miles. 50 more miles, and she would be free. She mouthed the words like a prayer, her breath fogging the glass. Behind her eyes, unbidden, came the memory she had spent 3 years trying to forget. Hands around her throat, the shattering of glass, blood spreading across a wooden floor like spilled ink. Clara gasped and jerked upright, her fingers flying to her neck where the faded scars still lived beneath her collar. Her travel bag sat heavy in her lap, and she felt the reassuring weight of the small Derringer pistol hidden inside. She had not fired a gun since that night in Boston. She prayed she would never need to fire one again. The stagecoach lurched over a rut in the road, and Clara steadied herself against the worn leather seat. Across from her, a middle-aged drummer snored with his mouth open, his sample cases of patent medicines rattling with each bump. Beside him sat a man Clara had been trying not to look at since they left the last way station. He wore a long duster coat despite the summer heat, and his hat was pulled low enough to shadow his face. But she had felt his eyes on her for miles now, watching, waiting. The coach slowed as dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. They pulled into a small way station, nothing more than a wooden shack and a corral of tired horses. The old driver climbed down with a groan, his joints cracking like dry kindling. "Trouble ahead," he announced to no one in particular. "Route through Devil's Gorge has been seeing bandits. We will rest the horses and push through quick as we can." Clara stepped out to stretch her legs, grateful for the cool morning air. The drummer followed, immediately launching into a sales pitch for his liver tonic to the station keeper. But the man in the duster coat moved differently. He unfolded himself from the coach with the easy grace of someone accustomed to violence. And when he finally lifted his head, Clara saw his face clearly for the first time. He was handsome in a hard way, with a jaw like chiseled granite and eyes the color of a frozen pond. Those eyes found hers and held them. "Boston, is it?" His voice was pleasant enough, but something beneath it made Clara's skin prickle. "I knew some folks from Boston once." Clara forced her expression to remain neutral. "Is that so?" The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Name is Jacob Miller, bounty hunter by trade. He touched the brim of his hat. And you are? Clara Bennett. She did not offer her hand. I am traveling to meet my intended. Ah, a mail-order bride. Jacob Miller nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. Brave thing traveling alone. Dangerous country out here. All sorts of predators. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. I can take care of myself, Mr. Miller. I am sure you can. He leaned against the coach, casual as a cat watching a mouse. Say, did you hear about that famous case back in Boston? The woman who killed her husband? He let the words hang in the air like smoke. Quite the scandal, I heard. They say she stabbed him right through the heart. Clara's hands trembled, but she clasped them behind her back where he could not see. I do not follow society gossip, she said, and turned away before he could see the fear in her eyes. 200 miles to the north, Samuel Thornton stood on the warped wooden platform of the Clearwater Depot, watching an empty horizon where his future should have arrived. Papa. The small voice came from behind him. Rosie had been sitting on the bench for hours, her dark braids wilted in the heat, her small hands folded in her lap. The stage was supposed to come yesterday. I know, little bird, and the day before. I know that too. Samuel did not turn around. If he looked at his daughter right now, he would see hope dying by degrees in her eyes, and he had seen enough of that to last a lifetime. The memory came unbidden. Coming home 3 years ago to find Rosie standing frozen outside the barn door, her eyes fixed on something inside. The shape of Mary's body hanging from the rafters, still swaying slightly in the draft. Samuel had told everyone it was cholera. Cholera took her and Thomas both, he said, and people believed him because people needed to believe such things. But Rosie had been standing there. Rosie had seen. The station master emerged from the telegraph office, his face grave. Mr. Thornton? Got a wire from the junction. Samuel's hand found Rosie's shoulder. She had risen from the bench and pressed close to his side the way she did whenever bad news approached. 3 years of grief had taught the child to read storms before they hit. What does it say? The station master swallowed hard. Westbound stage wrecked in the Badlands. Devil's Gorge, driver dead. 3 passengers. He paused. No survivors expected. The world narrowed to the edges of that telegram. Samuel heard his own voice as if from a great distance. When did this happen? 4 days ago. Stage was supposed to arrive here on the 18th. 4 days. Clara had promised to arrive on the 18th. 4 days of summer heat in the Badlands would kill anyone who survived the wreck itself. Rosie tugged his sleeve. Papa? Is it the lady? Miss Clara? Samuel knelt down, bringing himself eye level with the only person he had left in this world. I do not know, sweetheart. But I am going to find out. Back in Devil's Gorge, the stagecoach had entered the narrow passage between towering red cliffs. Clara watched the shadows deepen around them, her unease growing with every turn of the wheels. Beautiful country, Jacob Miller said from across the coach. His eyes had not left her face for miles. Dangerous, though. A person could disappear out here and never be found. The drummer stirred from his nap, mumbling something about liver tonics. Clara opened her mouth to respond to Miller when the world exploded into chaos. Gunshots cracked through the canyon like thunder. The driver screamed. The horses shrieked and reared. Clara was thrown against the side of the coach as it lurched violently to one side. Through the window, she saw Jacob Miller move, not like a frightened passenger, like a man who knew exactly what was happening. He threw open the coach door and leaped out, landing on his feet with practiced ease, just before the stagecoach went over the edge. Clara had one moment of perfect clarity as the world tilted. She saw Miller standing on the canyon rim, looking down at her with a cold smile. She heard his voice, clear as a church bell, cutting through the screaming of horses and the splintering of wood. See you soon, sister-in-law. Then the coach was tumbling and Clara was falling and her head struck something hard. and there was only darkness. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was Jacob Hale standing above her, silhouetted against the Wyoming sky, watching her fall. And she understood, with terrible certainty, that he had planned this from the beginning. Pain was the first thing Clara knew when consciousness returned. Pain in her legs, her ribs, her head. Pain everywhere, as if her body had been taken apart and reassembled wrong. She opened her eyes to a sky the color of burnished copper, late afternoon light slanting through the canyon walls above her. The stagecoach lay in pieces around her, splintered wood and scattered luggage, and the terrible stillness of bodies that would never move again. The driver was dead. She could see him 20 feet away, his neck bent at an impossible angle. The drummer lay half-buried under wreckage, his patent medicine bottles shattered around him like fallen stars. His chest did not rise. Clara tried to move and nearly screamed. Her right leg. Something was very wrong with her right leg. She forced herself to look down and immediately wished she had not. The bone was visible, white and jagged, pushing through torn flesh and blood-soaked fabric. Her left leg was bent strangely, too, though at least the skin was intact, dislocated, maybe, or broken in a place she could not see. Her travel bag was gone. She searched the wreckage with desperate eyes, but found nothing. The derringer, the money, everything she had brought to start her new life. All of it taken. From somewhere above her, echoing off the canyon walls, came a voice she would never forget. Clara. Jacob Hale's call drifted down like poison on the wind. I know you are alive down there. Do not worry. I am coming to get you. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle the sob that tried to escape. Through tear-blurred vision, she looked up and saw him. A dark figure on the canyon rim 100 feet above, watching through what must have been a spyglass. Did you really think you could run, Clara? His voice was conversational, almost friendly. Daniel might forgive you in hell, but I never will. Daniel. The name hit her like a physical blow. Daniel Hale, her dead husband, and Jacob, his older brother, who had apparently spent 3 years tracking her across the country. The courts may have called it self-defense, Jacob continued, but I was there when they put my baby brother in the ground. I raised that boy after our folks died, changed his diapers, taught him to ride. And you put a knife in his heart. Clara's mind raced. The cliff below Jacob was sheer, nearly vertical. He could not climb down from where he stood. He would have to find another way around, and in this maze of canyons, that could take days. I will be seeing you soon, Clara. Jacob's voice grew fainter as he moved away from the edge. Real soon. Then silence, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Clara lay still for a long moment, fighting the urge to simply close her eyes and let go. It would be easy. So easy to just stop fighting, to let the desert and the heat and the blood loss do what Jacob Hale had failed to finish. But then she thought of Samuel Thornton, a man she had never met who had written her letters full of quiet hope and careful longing, a man with a daughter who needed a mother, a man who was waiting for her right now, wondering why she had not come. She had made a promise, and Clara Bennett did not break her promises. Move or die, she whispered to herself. Those are the only choices. She began to search the wreckage around her, dragging herself with her arms, biting back screams with every movement. She found a plank of wood from the coach wall, a strip of leather from the driver's harness, a flask of water that had somehow survived the fall. The splinting of her own leg was the worst thing she had ever done. She used the wood and leather to immobilize the broken bone, stuffing a wad of fabric into her mouth to muffle her screams. By the time she finished, she was shaking so badly she could barely see, and the sun had moved noticeably across the sky. But she could move now, not walk. Walking was impossible with 2 ruined legs, but she could crawl. Somewhere to the north she could hear the faint sound of running water. A creek, maybe, or a spring. North was the direction of Clearwater. North was where Samuel waited. North was the only direction that mattered. Clara began to pull herself across the canyon floor, inch by agonizing inch, leaving a trail of blood in the red Wyoming dirt behind her. Night came, and with it came the cold. Clara found a shallow cave in the canyon wall, barely more than an overhang of rock, and dragged herself inside. Her body burned with the beginnings of fever, and her mind kept slipping sideways into memories she had spent years trying to bury. Daniel Hale had been charming when she met him, handsome and wealthy and full of promises. She had been 29 years old, already considered a spinster by Boston society, and grateful that any man would want her. She should have known, should have seen the cruelty beneath the charm, the possessiveness beneath the attention. But by the time she understood what he really was, it was too late. She was his wife, his property under the law. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of broken bones and split lips and apologies that meant nothing. 3 years of being told she was worthless, stupid, lucky that anyone would have her. The night she killed him, he had come home drunk. She had looked at another man, he said. Smiled at the baker's son when she bought bread that morning. Whore, he called her, and worse. And then his hands were around her throat, squeezing, and she could not breathe, and her vision was going dark. She did not remember reaching for the knife, did not remember the thrust that ended his life. She only remembered sitting beside his body until dawn, feeling nothing at all. Not relief, not grief, just emptiness, vast and cold as the space between stars. The court had called it self-defense. The jury had deliberated for less than an hour. But Boston society had its own verdict, and that verdict was guilty. Guilty of being a woman who fought back. Guilty of surviving. So she had run, changed her name, answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, and fled as far west as the railroads would take her. And now Daniel's brother had found her anyway. "I chose to live," Clara whispered into the darkness of the cave. "That is all I did. I chose to live." She said it again, louder, as if the words could ward off the ghosts that haunted her. "I am not sorry. I would do it again." Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Clara closed her eyes and let the fever pull her down into restless sleep. She woke to footsteps. Her eyes flew open, her heart pounding. Morning light filtered into the cave and someone was approaching. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow. Clara pressed herself against the back of the cave, her hands scrabbling for a rock, a stick, anything she could use as a weapon. She found a stone the size of her fist and gripped it tight, waiting. A shadow fell across the cave entrance, but it was not Jacob Hale who stood there. It was an old man, weathered and brown-skinned, with silver hair braided down his back and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of mountains. He wore buckskin and carried a leather pouch at his hip. He looked at Clara for a long moment, taking in her ruined legs, her fevered face, the desperate grip on her inadequate weapon. Then, without a word, he knelt and placed something beside her. A water skin, full and heavy. A bundle of dried meat. Clara stared at him, unable to speak. The old man rose. He pointed to the north, where the canyon walls gave way to open country. He spoke one word, in English, his voice rough with disuse. North. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing around a bend in the canyon as silently as he had come. From a distant hilltop, invisible to both Clara and her mysterious benefactor, Jacob Hale watched through his spyglass. He saw the old native man leave, noted the direction he pointed. A slow smile spread across Jacob's face. "Thank you, old-timer," he murmured. "Now I know exactly where she is headed." He began to move, circling around through the maze of canyons, cutting off the route to the north. The hunt was just beginning. Samuel Thornton rode south into the Badlands with nothing but determination and the slim hope that miracles still happened in Wyoming territory. He had left at first light, ignoring the station master's warnings about bandits in rough country. He had left Rosie with Doc Wade, promising to return in 3 days. But his daughter's eyes had followed him as he mounted his horse, and he had seen something in them that made his chest ache. She was afraid. Afraid he would not come back, the same way her mother had not come back. But he could not stay. could not stand idle while somewhere out there a woman who had written him letters full of hope and longing might be dying alone. The trail to Devil's Gorge was rough but clear, a wagon road worn into the red earth by years of stagecoach travel. Samuel pushed his horse as fast as the terrain would allow, stopping only to water the animal and check for signs of the wreck. He found it on the second day. The stagecoach lay at the bottom of a steep ravine, broken into pieces like a child's toy thrown down in anger. Samuel tied his horse at the rim and climbed down carefully, his boots sliding on loose rock. The smell hit him first. 2 days in the summer heat had done its work on the bodies. Samuel covered his nose with his bandana and approached, forcing himself to look at each victim. The driver, a middle-aged man in a drummer's suit. No woman. Samuel's heart leaped. He searched the wreckage more carefully now, looking for any sign of Clara Bennett. He found a woman's travel bag, torn and empty. A Derringer pistol, the chamber fully loaded. Why would she leave behind a loaded gun? Then he saw the drag marks. 2 parallel grooves in the dirt leading away from the wreck. Not animal tracks, too deliberate, too purposeful. Someone had crawled away from this place. And based on the distance between the grooves, that someone had been pulling themselves with their arms while their legs dragged uselessly behind. Samuel followed the trail. It led north toward Clearwater, weaving between rocks and scrub brush, but never veering from its general direction. Whoever had made these marks knew where they wanted to go. The blood was dry, brown and flaking, at least 2 days old. But the trail was clear, and Samuel Thornton followed it like a man possessed. 300 miles to the east in a town called Clearwater, a stranger rode in on a tired horse. Marshal Cole Winters had been tracking a killer for 6 months now. A woman named Margaret Holloway, wanted for the murder of 2 husbands in Kansas and possibly a third in Missouri. She was clever, this Margaret, changing names and appearances like other women changed dresses. But Winters was patient. He had tracked worse. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and stepped inside, his federal badge catching the light from the window. Sheriff Perkins looked up from his desk, one hand drifting toward his gun before he saw the badge and relaxed. "Help you, Marshal?" Winters pulled a folded paper from his coat and spread it on the desk. It was a sketch of a woman's face, pretty in an unremarkable way with light eyes and dark hair. "Name is Cole Winters, United States Marshal. I'm tracking a woman wanted for murder in Kansas. Goes by different names. Last seen heading this direction." Perkins studied the sketch, his brow furrowed. "Cannot say she looks familiar, but we had some excitement here yesterday. Stagecoach went down in Devil's Gorge. They say there was a woman passenger. Mail-order bride coming to marry Sam Thornton." Winters straightened. "This woman. She survived the wreck? Do not know yet. Thornton rode out to find her, should be back in a day or 2. Winters nodded slowly, his mind working. "Interesting. Think I will wait around. See who turns up." He touched the brim of his hat and walked out, leaving Sheriff Perkins to wonder just what kind of trouble had ridden into town. Jacob Hale moved through the canyons like a ghost. He knew this country, had spent weeks scouting it before Clara's stagecoach was scheduled to arrive, learning every trail and water source, every blind canyon and hidden pass. He knew exactly how long it would take a healthy man to walk from the wreck site to Clearwater. For a woman with 2 broken legs crawling on her belly like a snake, it would take much longer, if she survived at all. Part of him hoped she would survive long enough for him to find her. He wanted to see her face when she realized there was no escape. Wanted to watch the hope drain from her eyes the way it had drained from his when they lowered Daniel into the ground. His baby brother, his only family. Gone because of a woman who claimed she had no choice. Jacob had read the trial transcripts. He knew what Clara had told the court, that Daniel drank, that he hit her, that the night she killed him, he was strangling her to death and she grabbed the knife in blind desperation. Lies. All lies. Daniel had been troubled, yes. Their parents' death had hit him hard and he had turned to whiskey for comfort. But he was not a monster. He was just a man who loved his wife too much, and she had repaid that love with betrayal and murder. "The courts may have freed her," Jacob muttered as he climbed a rocky ridge. "But Hale justice is not finished. He reached the top and pulled out his spyglass, scanning the terrain to the north. There, a smudge of color against the red and brown of the desert. Clara was still moving, still crawling toward the impossible goal of Clearwater. Jacob smiled and began to descend the ridge, angling to cut off her path. Rosie Thornton was supposed to stay with Doc Wade. That was what Papa had said. Stay here, be good, and I will be back before you know it. But Rosie was 8 years old, and she had learned 3 years ago that promises did not always get kept. Mama had promised to always be there. Mama had promised to never leave. And then Rosie had found her in the barn, hanging from the rafters, her eyes open and staring at nothing. Papa did not know that Rosie had seen. She had never told him, because telling would make him sad. And Papa was already so sad all the time. So she pretended. Pretended she believed the story about cholera. Pretended she did not have nightmares about finding Mama's body. Pretended everything was fine. But now Papa was riding into dangerous country. And what if he did not come back? What if Rosie was left all alone with no one to pretend for? She slipped out of Doc Wade's house just after sunset when the old man was busy with a patient who had cut his hand on a saw blade. She took the small paint pony from the livery, the gentle one Papa used to teach her to ride. She packed bread and cheese from the kitchen and a canteen of water. Then she rode south, following the trail her father had taken. Clara had lost count of the days. Time had become meaningless, measured only in inches of ground gained and swallows of water from the skin the old man had given her. Her fever burned hotter each night, and during the day she crawled through a haze of pain and delirium. Sometimes she talked to Daniel, told him she was not sorry, told him she would do it again if she had to, told him he could rot in hell for all she cared. Sometimes she talked to Samuel, the man she had never met. Told him she was coming, told him she had promised and she would not break that promise, told him about the letters she had written, all the things she had been too afraid to say out loud. I spent 12 years raising my sister after our parents died, she had written, 12 years putting someone else first. And then she married and did not need me anymore. And I realized I had never once lived for myself. I am 32 years old, Mr. Thornton. I have never been to a dance, never worn a pretty dress just because I wanted to, never kissed a man who did not hurt me afterward. I want to know what it feels like to be wanted, not for what I can do, but for who I am. Is that foolish? It feels foolish to write it down. But you asked me to be honest in my letters, and this is the honest truth of my heart. She had been so afraid to send that letter, had almost burned it a dozen times, but Samuel's response had made her weep. Miss Bennet, he had written, there is nothing foolish about wanting to be loved. I reckon most folks want the same thing but are too scared to say so. I am one of them. My wife passed 3 years ago, and I have been scared ever since. Scared to hope, scared to try again. But your letters make me less scared, and I think maybe that is what love is supposed to do. Clara dragged herself another foot, then another. The sun beat down mercilessly, and her water was almost gone. But somewhere ahead, a man who wrote letters like poetry was waiting for her. She would not let him wait forever. The third day dawned gray and cool, a rare gift of cloud cover that slowed the relentless heat. Clara woke from fevered dreams to find herself at the bottom of a shallow gully, with no memory of how she had gotten there. She tried to move and found she could not. Her right leg had swollen to twice its normal size, the skin around the break angry and red. Infection was setting in. She could feel it spreading through her body like fire. This is it, she thought. This is where I die. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her. The last thing she heard before consciousness faded was the sound of small footsteps approaching. Rosie Thornton had been lost for most of a day when she stumbled across the woman in the gully. She had followed what she thought was Papa's trail, but somewhere along the way she had taken a wrong turn, and now she was alone in a landscape of red rock and scrub brush that all looked the same. Her water was almost gone. Her pony had thrown a shoe and was limping. Then she saw the flash of color, blue fabric against red dirt. She guided her pony closer and found a woman lying at the bottom of a shallow wash, so still that Rosie thought at first she was dead. But no, her chest was moving just barely. And when Rosie climbed down from her pony and knelt beside her, the woman's eyes fluttered open. "Are you Miss Clara?" The woman stared at her with fever-bright eyes. Her face was burned and blistered, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her legs were wrapped in bloody rags, bent at angles that made Rosie's stomach turn. But she was alive, and when she spoke, her voice was stronger than it had any right to be. "I am Clara. Are you Rosie?" Rosie nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was looking for Papa, but I got lost." Clara's hand found hers, grip weak but warm. "Do not be scared, sweetheart. I will not let anyone hurt you." From somewhere nearby came the sound of hoofbeats, growing closer. Clara's eyes went wide. She pulled Rosie down behind a large boulder, covering the child's mouth with her hand. They waited, barely breathing, as the hoofbeats grew louder. Clara pressed Rosie against the boulder, feeling the child's heart racing through her thin dress. Her own heart hammered in her chest, and her hand tightened on the rock she had managed to grab. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all she had. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped. She heard the creak of leather as someone dismounted. "If something happens," Clara whispered against Rosie's ear, "you run. Do not look back. Just run." Rosie shook her head violently, tears streaming silently down her face. She clung to Clara's arm with both hands. "I am not leaving you." The footsteps came closer, crunching on gravel, measured and deliberate. Clara raised the rock, prepared to fight with whatever strength she had left. She would not go quietly. She had crawled too far to die without a struggle. A shadow fell across them. Clara. The voice that spoke her name was not Jacob Hale's. It was deeper, rougher, worn down by grief and miles of hard riding. It was a voice she had never heard but somehow recognized. Samuel? The man standing above her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair gone gray at the temples and eyes the color of Wyoming sage. He had the look of someone who had not slept in days. And when he saw her, really saw her, his face crumpled with a mix of horror and relief. "Papa." Rosie broke free from Clara's grip and ran to her father, throwing herself into his arms. Samuel caught her and held her tight, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "You found her," Rosie sobbed into his chest. "I got lost and I found her and she was hurt. But she is alive, Papa. She is alive. I see that little bird." Samuel set his daughter down gently and moved to kneel beside Clara. His hands hovered over her, not quite touching, as if afraid she might shatter. "Good God, woman, what happened to you?" Clara tried to answer, but the words would not come. The relief was too overwhelming, washing over her like a wave, and she felt herself slipping away. "You are Samuel," she managed. "You came. I came." "Good." Her eyes drifted closed. "I kept my word." She felt his hand close around hers, strong and warm. And then consciousness finally let go. Samuel worked fast. The years of ranching had taught him how to set broken bones in cattle, how to splint legs and stop bleeding and keep an animal alive long enough to heal. He prayed those skills would translate to the woman lying before him. Her right leg was bad, very bad. The bone had broken through the skin, and the wound had festered, turning angry shades of red and purple. Infection was spreading up her thigh. If a doctor did not see her soon, she would lose the leg. Or worse. The left leg was dislocated at the knee, but not broken. Samuel set it back in place as gently as he could, and even unconscious, Clara screamed. The sound tore at something deep in his chest. Rosie stood nearby, watching with wide eyes. She did not flinch, did not cry. Just watched her father work, occasionally passing him supplies from his saddlebags when he asked. "How far did she crawl?" Rosie asked when Samuel paused to drink some water. "I do not know." Samuel looked back along the trail Clara had left. The twin furrows in the dirt that stretched toward the south. Miles, maybe, on two broken legs. Why did she not stop? because someone was hunting her. Clara's words from before she passed out echoed in his mind, and because she made a promise. Samuel built a travois from his bedroll and some fallen branches, lashing it together with rope from his pack. He lifted Clara as carefully as he could, settling her onto the makeshift stretcher. She moaned, but did not wake. "Can you ride by yourself?" he asked Rosie. The child nodded, her face set with determination that made her look far older than her 8 years. "Then let us go. We have a long way to Clearwater." They had been traveling for perhaps an hour when Samuel noticed they were being followed. He said nothing to Rosie, not wanting to frighten her more than she already was. But he kept his rifle across his saddle and his eyes on the ridgeline to the east, where he had caught a flash of reflected light. A spyglass, maybe, or the barrel of a gun. Someone was watching them. Someone who did not want to be seen. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness as the travois bumped along behind Samuel's horse. Once, she woke enough to speak. "Daniel," she murmured, her voice thick with fever. "No. Let go of me." Samuel glanced back at her, frowning. Who was Daniel? The answer would have to wait. Right now, his only concern was getting Clara to Dr. Wade before the infection killed her. They reached Clearwater just after sunset, the town's few street lamps beginning to glow against the gathering dark. Samuel rode straight to Doc Wade's house, not stopping to answer the curious looks of the townsfolk who watched them pass. Wade himself came running out before Samuel had even dismounted. "I heard you found her." "Good Lord, Sam, what condition is she in?" "Bad." Samuel handed him the reins and moved to lift Clara from the travois. "Right leg is broken in at least 2 places. Bone came through the skin. Infection has set in." Wade's face went gray. "Get her inside. Now." They carried her to the examination room, laying her on the table as gently as they could. Wade lit every lamp he had and began cutting away the blood-soaked rags that covered her legs. "Sam," he said after a long moment, "you should take Rosie out of here." "I am staying," Rosie said. Her voice was small but firm. "She needs someone to hold her hand." Wade looked at Samuel, eyebrows raised. Samuel looked at his daughter, at the steel in her eyes that reminded him so much of her mother on the good days. "She stays," he said. "Now, tell me how bad it is." Wade took a deep breath. "The right leg. The break is severe, and the infection has spread to the bone. I can try to save it, but if I fail, the infection will kill her within days." He met Samuel's eyes. "Or I can take the leg now." "That gives her the best chance of survival." "No." The word came from Clara. Her eyes were open, fever bright but lucid. "Miss Bennett." Wade moved to her side. "You should not be awake." "I heard what you said." Clara's voice was stronger than her body had any right to produce. "You are not taking my leg. Ma'am, the infection. I did not crawl 3 miles on 2 broken legs to lose one of them." Clara fixed the doctor with a stare that could have melted iron. "I should have died 5 times this week. If God wanted me dead, he had plenty of chances. Try to save it." Wade looked at Samuel. "Sam, it is her leg." Samuel moved to Clara's side, taking her hand. "Her choice." "All right, then." Wade rolled up his sleeves. "This is going to hurt. A lot. I'm going to need whiskey, hot water, and clean bandages. And someone strong to hold her down." "I will hold her," Rosie said. Everyone stared at the 8-year-old girl. "I know how to help," Rosie continued, her chin raised. "I did not know how to help when Mama died, but I can help now. Tell me what to do." Something passed across Samuel's face, a flicker of pain, of recognition. He looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "All right, little bird. You hold her hand. Do not let go, no matter what. I will not." The surgery took 2 hours. Clara screamed until her voice gave out, then whimpered, then fell silent. Rosie held her hand the entire time, murmuring reassurances that Clara probably could not hear, but that seemed to help anyway. Samuel held Clara's shoulders, keeping her still while Wade worked, trying not to look at the blood and pus and exposed bone. Finally, Wade stepped back, his hands trembling with exhaustion. I have done what I can. The leg is cleaned and set. Whether she keeps it depends on the infection. If the fever breaks in the next 2 days, she might survive. If it does not. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Samuel stood watch that night while Clara burned with fever. He sat in a chair beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall, counting each breath as if afraid she might stop. Rosie had fallen asleep on a cot in the corner, finally surrendering to exhaustion. The house was quiet except for the ticking of Wade's mantel clock. Sometime after midnight, Clara's eyes opened. "Samuel? I am here." She turned her head toward him, her gaze unfocused but aware. "You came. You actually came to find me. Told you I would." "Why?" She swallowed, her throat dry. "You did not even know me. I was just a name on a letter." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "When my wife died, I stopped believing in much of anything, stopped hoping, stopped trying. Just got through each day because Rosie needed me to, but there was not anything left inside. Then your first letter came." He reached over and brushed a strand of sweat-dampened hair from her forehead. "You wrote about wanting to be needed, about never having lived for yourself, about being scared but trying anyway. And I thought, here is someone who understands. Here is someone who knows what it is like to be hollowed out and still have to keep going." Clara's hand found his, her grip weak but warm. "I have been running for 3 years," she whispered. "Running from what I did. Running from who I was. I thought if I could just get far enough away, I could start over. Be someone new. What did you do?" Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, tracking down her temples into her hair. "I killed my husband, Samuel. I put a knife in his heart and watched him die." Samuel did not flinch, did not pull away, did not let go of her hand. "Why?" "Because he was killing me." Clara closed her eyes. 3 years he beat me, broke my bones, told me I was worthless. And the night I killed him, his hands were around my throat and I could not breathe, and I knew if I did not do something, I was going to die. Self-defense, the court said so. Clara's voice was bitter, but his brother did not agree. "That is who is hunting me. Jacob Hale. He caused the stagecoach crash. He wants to finish what Daniel started." Samuel absorbed this in silence. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon. "The man at the depot," he said finally, "fellow who said he survived the crash, called himself Jacob Miller." Clara's eyes flew open. "You met him?" Shook his hand. Thanked him for his concern. Samuel's jaw tightened. "Did not know I was shaking hands with the man who tried to kill you. He is here, in Clearwater, staying at the boarding house, far as I know." Samuel stood, his face hard. "But not for long." "Samuel." Clara caught his wrist with surprising strength. "Do not go after him. He is dangerous. He planned this for years. He is patient and smart, and he will kill you if you give him the chance. I am not just going to let him walk around free while you are lying here fighting for your life. And I'm not going to let you get killed because of me." Clara pulled him closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Please, stay with me tonight. We can figure out what to do about Jacob tomorrow. Just stay." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had crawled through hell to keep a promise. The woman who had killed to survive and carried the guilt like a stone around her neck. The woman who was asking him to stay. He sat back down in his chair, his hand finding hers again. "I am not going anywhere," he said. Clara closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, the fear that had been her constant companion seemed to ease, just a little. She slept. And outside, standing in the shadows across the street from Doc Wade's house, Jacob Hale watched the lamplight in the window and smiled. Clara's fever broke on the 3rd day. She woke to morning light streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere nearby. Her body ached in ways she had not known were possible, but the burning fog that had clouded her mind was gone. Doc Wade stood at the foot of her bed, his face slack with disbelief. "Well, I will be damned," he said. "Pardon my language, Miss Bennet." "It is Thornton now," Clara murmured. "Or it will be, if he still wants me." Samuel appeared in the doorway, Rosie peeking out from behind his legs. They both looked like they had not slept in days. "Still want you," Samuel said. That was never in question. They moved her to a proper bed in Wade's spare room, and over the next week, Clara began the slow process of healing. Her right leg remained a concern. Wade had saved it from amputation, but the bone was setting crooked, and he warned her she might never walk without a limp. "Better a limp than a grave," Clara said. "I will take it." Samuel came every day, sometimes bringing Rosie, sometimes alone. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps that letters could not cover. He told her about the ranch, about the creek that ran year-round, about Mary's piano that had not been played since her death. She told him about Boston, about her sister Sarah, whom she had raised and lost to marriage, about the empty years of teaching other people's children while her own life slipped away. They did not talk about Daniel. Not yet. That wound was too fresh, too dangerous. But it hung between them like smoke, a presence neither could ignore. Meanwhile, Clearwater buzzed with rumors. The mail-order bride had arrived after all. Not on the stagecoach like expected, but crawling through the desert on broken legs. Some called it a miracle, others called it suspicious. And a few, influenced by whispers from a charming bounty hunter named Jacob Miller, called it something worse. Jacob had been busy. He had introduced himself around town as a survivor of the stagecoach crash, spinning a tale of heroism and tragedy that had the townsfolk hanging on his every word. He had bought drinks at the saloon, donated money to the church, and made himself generally indispensable. And wherever he went, he dropped little hints about Clara Bennett. "Terrible shame about that crash," he would say. "Lucky I jumped clear before it went over. That poor woman, though. The one who survived?" He would shake his head sadly. "I hate to speak ill, but there are things about her past, troubling things." Eleanor Price was particularly receptive to these hints. Eleanor was 45, wealthy, and bitter. She had set her cap for Samuel Thornton years ago, and his continued indifference to her charms had curdled into resentment. When Jacob Miller began telling her about the new bride's unsavory history, she listened with eager ears. "You mean to say she killed her husband?" Eleanor leaned forward over her tea, eyes bright with malicious interest. "Self-defense, they called it." Jacob's smile was thin as a blade. "But I knew Daniel Hale. He was my cousin, a gentle soul, would not hurt a fly. And she murdered him, stabbed him right through the heart." Jacob let his voice catch, a masterful performance of grief. "The courts let her go. But justice is not always served in courtrooms, is it, Mrs. Price?" Eleanor considered this. "And now she is here, planning to marry Samuel Thornton. So it seems." Eleanor's face hardened. "Something should be done." Jacob nodded slowly. Something should be done indeed. Marshal Cole Winters had been watching Jacob Miller since the day he rode into town. Something about the man did not sit right. He was too charming, too helpful, too eager to ingratiate himself. In Winters' experience, men who tried that hard to be liked usually had something to hide, so he watched, listened, asked questions without seeming to ask them. He learned that Jacob Miller had arrived in town the same day as the stagecoach crash, that he claimed to be a bounty hunter but had no papers, no warrants, no official business with the law, that he was spreading rumors about the woman Samuel Thornton had pulled from the desert. And he learned that Jacob Miller was not his real name. A telegraph to the marshal's office in Boston confirmed it. Jacob Hale, brother of Daniel Hale. Daniel had been killed 3 years ago by his wife. Self-defense, according to the court. But Jacob had disappeared shortly after the trial, and there were warrants outstanding in Texas for assault. Winters kept this information to himself for now. He had his own quarry to catch, a woman named Margaret Holloway who had killed at least 2 husbands for their money. The sketch he carried did not match Clara Bennett. Different bone structure, different eye shape. But Jacob Hale was interesting. Very interesting indeed. 2 weeks after arriving in Clearwater, Clara attempted to stand on her own for the first time. Samuel was there, ready to catch her. So was Rosie, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Doc Wade stood nearby with a cane, ready to hand it over if she could manage to stay upright. Clara placed her hands on the arms of her chair and pushed herself up. Her left leg took the weight easily enough. Her right leg. Fire shot up through her hip and her knee buckled. She would have fallen if Samuel had not caught her, his arms going around her waist. "I have got you," he said. Clara gripped his shoulders, breathing hard. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the stubble on his jaw, the worry lines etched around his mouth. And then his arm shifted, sliding up her back, and his forearm brushed against her throat. Everything stopped. Clara could not breathe, could not move. The room vanished, replaced by a memory of hands squeezing, of Daniel's face contorted with rage, of darkness closing in. She heard herself making a sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Samuel released her immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. "Clara!" His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Clara, look at me." She could not. Her eyes were fixed on nothing, seeing only the past. "Clara, you are safe. You are in Clearwater. Daniel is dead. He cannot hurt you." The name cut through the fog. Daniel is dead. She had killed him. He was dead and buried and gone. Slowly the present came back into focus. Doc Wade's spare room, the afternoon light through the window, Rosie's frightened face, Samuel standing 3 feet away, his expression a mix of concern and dawning understanding. "I am sorry," Clara whispered. Her whole body was shaking. "I am sorry. When you touched my neck, you do not have to explain. He used to strangle me." Clara forced the words out. "Daniel, when he was angry, his hands around my throat." She touched her collar where a faint scar was visible if you knew to look. "I thought I was over it. I thought. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget." Samuel's voice was gentle. "You got nothing to apologize for." Clara looked at him. This man who should have run screaming from her baggage, her trauma, her broken body and broken past. Instead, he just stood there, patient and steady as a mountain. "How can you want me?" she asked. "How can you want someone so damaged?" "We are all damaged, Clara." Samuel's eyes held hers. "Some of us just hide it better." That night, Clara could not sleep. The panic attack had shaken something loose in her. Memories she had spent 3 years burying. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move. A sound from outside. A creak of wood. Someone on the porch. Clara's heart began to pound. She reached for the cane beside her bed, gripping it like a weapon. The door to her room swung open. Jacob Hale stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint light from the hallway. He was smiling. "Did you think you were safe here, Clara?" Clara opened her mouth to scream, but he was across the room before the sound could escape, his hand clamping over her face. "Shh." His breath was hot against her ear. "I could kill you right now. So easy. Just put a pillow over your face and wait." He pressed harder, cutting off her air. "But that is not what I want." Clara thrashed against him, but her injured legs made it impossible to fight effectively. Stars began to dance at the edges of her vision. "I want you to know," Jacob continued, "that I can reach you any time I want. Anywhere you go, anyone who helps you." He released the pressure slightly, letting her gasp for breath. "When I kill you, Clara, you will see me coming. I want you to have time to be afraid." She tried to speak, to scream, to do anything. "Sweet dreams, sister-in-law." He was gone before she could react, slipping out the window like smoke. By the time Doc Wade burst through the door, shotgun in hand, there was no sign anyone had been there at all. "Just a nightmare," Wade said, lowering his weapon. "You were screaming. Must have been a nightmare." Clara stared at the open window, at the curtains stirring in the night breeze. "Yes," she whispered, "a nightmare." But she knew the truth. and she knew that nowhere in Clearwater was safe. Samuel came at first light, alerted by Wade's message. He found Clara sitting up in bed, pale and hollow-eyed, but fully alert. She told him everything: Jacob's visit, his threats, his promise that she would see him coming. Samuel listened without interrupting. When she finished, his jaw was set hard as granite. "You are moving to the ranch," he said. "Today. I can barely walk. Then I will carry you." Samuel stood. "I will not leave you here where he can get to you. My place is defensible. One road in, clear sightlines here. And I have guns, lots of guns. He will come anyway." Clara's voice was small. "He will never stop. Then we will be ready." Samuel moved to the bed, taking her hand. "You are not alone anymore, Clara. Whatever comes, you will not face it alone." Clara looked at him. At the determination in his eyes, the strength in his grip, the stubborn set of his jaw. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk yourself for me?" "Because 3 years ago, I let someone I loved face the darkness alone." Samuel's voice caught. "I did not see how bad it was. Did not understand until it was too late." He took a shaky breath. "I am not making that mistake again." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Samuel, what happened to Mary?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to speak. "She did not die of cholera," he said. "That was a lie I told to protect her memory. And Rosie," he swallowed hard. "Mary, after we lost Thomas, she fell into a darkness I could not reach. I thought she would get better. Thought if I just gave her time." "What happened? She asked me not to leave her that night." Samuel's eyes were wet. "Said she was scared. Said she needed me. And I told her I had to check on the herd. Told her she would be fine." "Samuel, when I got home, Rosie was standing outside the barn. Just standing there, staring. And inside. You do not have to tell me. She hanged herself." Samuel's voice broke. "My wife hanged herself because I was not there when she needed me, because I did not see, because I was not enough." Clara pulled him close, and he let her. They held each other in the morning light, two broken people finding strength in shared pain. "I will not make that mistake again," Samuel said against her hair. "Whatever you need, whatever you are facing, I will be there." "I know," Clara whispered. "I believe you." Outside, the sun rose over Clearwater, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. And in a room at the boarding house, Jacob Hale cleaned his knife and waited. The Thornton Ranch sat at the end of a long valley surrounded by rolling hills and bounded on one side by a creek that glittered like silver in the afternoon sun. The cabin was small but well built, with a wide porch and a stone chimney and windows that looked out over miles of open country. Clara saw it for the first time from the back of Samuel's wagon, propped up on blankets with her splinted legs stretched out before her. Despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the uncertainty, something in her chest unclenched at the sight. It looked like home. Rosie came running out before the wagon had fully stopped, her braids flying behind her. "She is here. She is really here." The child bounced on her heels, practically vibrating with excitement. "I made up the spare room, put wildflowers on the dresser, the yellow ones from by the creek." "That was very kind, Rosie." Clara managed a smile despite her exhaustion. "I am sure it is lovely." Samuel carried her inside, ignoring her protests that she could manage with a cane. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and parlor, two bedrooms off the back, and a loft above. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and beside it stood a piano, its surface dusty with disuse. "Mary's," Samuel said when he saw Clara looking. "Her mother sent it from St. Louis before we were married. She used to play every evening." He set Clara down gently in a chair by the window. "Has not been touched since she died." Clara reached out to touch one of the keys. Dust rose in the afternoon light. "Maybe Rosie would like to learn," she said softly. when I am well enough to teach her. You play? My mother taught me, before she died. Clara smiled at the memory. I used to dream of being a concert pianist. Silly, really. But I still love the music. Samuel was quiet for a moment, looking at the piano, at Clara, at the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Nothing silly about dreams, he said finally. Welcome home, Clara. The next few weeks were the strangest of Clara's life. Strange because for the first time in years, she felt safe. The ranch was isolated, yes, and Jacob Hale was still out there somewhere, but the walls around her felt solid, and the man who patrolled them felt even more so. Samuel took shifts watching through the night, rifle across his knees, and during the day he was never far from Clara's side. Strange, too, because she found herself healing. Not just her legs, though those improved daily. Doc Wade visited twice a week, and each time he pronounced himself amazed at her progress. The bone was knitting. The infection was fading. She might walk with a limp, but she would walk. But the deeper healing was happening, too. In the quiet conversations with Samuel after Rosie went to bed. In the afternoons spent teaching the child to read from a book of fairy tales. In the evenings when Samuel would sit beside her on the porch, not touching, not needing to, just being present. Tell me about Boston, he said one night, when the stars were thick as spilled sugar overhead. What do you want to know? Everything. Whatever you want to tell me. So Clara told him. About the narrow house where she had grown up. About her parents dying when she was 18 and Sarah only 6. About the years of work and sacrifice to keep her sister fed and clothed and educated. I was a governess, she said. For wealthy families, I raised their children while putting Sarah through school. She paused. When she was 18, she married a merchant from Philadelphia. Good man, loves her. You raised her and she left. Clara nodded. I spent 12 years making myself indispensable. And then, one day, I was not needed anymore. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I did not know who I was without someone to take care of. Is that why you married Daniel? Partly. Clara stared at the stars. I was 29, a spinster by society's standards. He was handsome and charming and interested. I thought it was my last chance. And he hurt you. Not at first. The first year he was everything I dreamed of. Attentive, generous, loving. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. Then I lost the first baby. Miscarriage at 4 months. And something changed in him. Samuel reached over and took her hand. She let him. The beating started small. A slap here, a shove there. Always with apologies after. Always with promises to do better. But it got worse. By the 3rd year, I was covered in bruises more often than not. He broke my arm twice, cracked my ribs, and always, he told me it was my fault, that I deserved it, that no one else would ever want me. You survived. I killed him. Clara's voice was flat. The night he died, he came home drunk, accused me of looking at another man. He started choking me, and I just knew, that this time he was not going to stop. She touched her throat, where the scar hid beneath her collar. I grabbed a knife from the table. I did not even think, just grabbed it and stabbed, and he fell. Self-defense. The court said so. Clara finally looked at Samuel. His face held no judgment, only understanding. But I still killed him. I watched the life drain out of his eyes. And the worst part? She swallowed hard. I was not sad. I was not scared. I was just empty. Because you had been dying for 3 years. Samuel squeezed her hand. He just died faster. Clara blinked. No one had ever put it that way before. You are not a murderer, Clara. Samuel's voice was firm. You are a survivor. There is a difference. She looked at him. This man who had lost his wife to darkness he could not fight, who carried guilt for things that were not his fault. who opened his home to a stranger because she reminded him of his own pain. "I love you," she said. The words surprised them both. Clara felt her cheeks flush. "I am sorry. I should not have. It is too soon. Samuel kissed her. It was gentle, almost hesitant, like he was asking a question he was afraid to hear the answer to. Clara answered by pulling him closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. 3 years of loneliness crashing against the walls she had built around her heart. When they finally broke apart, both of them were trembling. "I love you too," Samuel said. "Been loving you since your first letter. Just took me a while to admit it." Clara laughed, really laughed for the first time in years. "We are quite a pair," she said, both of us too scared to hope. Samuel touched her face, his calloused thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Maybe we can be scared together," he said. "Seems easier that way." Rosie found them holding hands on the porch the next morning and broke into a grin that could have lit up the whole valley. "Does this mean you are getting married?" "That depends." Samuel looked at Clara. "Will you have me?" Clara pretended to think about it. "Well, you do have a nice ranch and a pretty good horse." "What about me?" Rosie demanded. "I am pretty good too." "You are the best part of the deal, little bird." Clara opened her arms, and Rosie threw herself into them. "Yes, I will marry you. Both of you." Rosie whooped with joy. Samuel's face split into a smile that took years off his weathered features, and for one perfect moment, none of them remembered that danger was still out there, waiting. But danger had not forgotten them. Back in Clearwater, Jacob Hale was putting the final pieces of his plan into place. He had spent weeks cultivating Eleanor Price, feeding her jealousy, stoking her resentment. Now it was time to harvest what he had sown. "Mrs. Price," he said, meeting her in the back room of the general store, "what if I told you I had evidence that Clara Bennett killed more than just her husband?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "The stagecoach crash." Jacob leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was there. I saw what happened. She killed the driver, killed the other passenger, left them to die while she saved herself. But I thought she was injured." "Injured, yes. But only because I tried to stop her." Jacob touched his temple where a faint scar had appeared, carefully self-inflicted to support his story. "She attacked me when I interfered. I barely escaped with my life." Eleanor's face hardened. "And now she is out at Samuel's ranch, playing the victim, getting ready to marry a good man under false pretenses." "Exactly." Jacob nodded sympathetically. "The law has not done its job, but perhaps public pressure might encourage them to look more closely at the evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "I have documents. Witness statements." Jacob smiled his cold smile. "But I need someone respectable to bring them forward. Someone the townsfolk will believe." Eleanor straightened. "I am on the church board. The ladies' auxiliary. People trust me." "Yes, they do." Jacob handed her a folder of papers, documents he had spent weeks forging. "All I need is for you to share these with Sheriff Perkins. Let the law take its course." Eleanor took the folder, her eyes gleaming with righteous indignation. "That woman has fooled everyone," she said. "But not me. I will see justice done." Jacob watched her go, satisfaction curling in his chest. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. The rumors reached the ranch before the law did. Samuel heard them in town when he went for supplies. Whispers at the general store, pointed looks at the saloon. Mrs. Henderson, who had always been friendly, suddenly could not meet his eyes. "People are saying things," Henderson finally admitted when Samuel pressed him. "About Miss Bennett, about the stagecoach crash." "What kind of things?" Henderson shifted uncomfortably. That maybe she caused it, maybe killed the driver and that drummer on purpose." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Who is saying this?" "Jacob Miller mostly, and Mrs. Price. She has been showing documents around, says they prove Miss Bennett is a murderer." "Documents?" Samuel's hands clenched at his sides. "What kind of documents? I do not know." Henderson backed away slightly. Look, Sam, I like you. I do, but if there is even a chance that woman you brought home is dangerous, she is not dangerous. Samuel's voice was hard. She is the victim here. Jacob Miller is not who he says he is. Then who is he? The brother of the man Clara killed in self-defense 3 years ago. Samuel grabbed Henderson by the arm. He has been hunting her ever since. The stagecoach crash was not an accident. He caused it. Tried to kill her. Henderson stared at him. Can you prove that? Not yet, but I will. Samuel rode home fast, his mind racing. Jacob was making his move. The slow game of whispers and rumors was building to something, and Samuel did not want Clara anywhere near Clearwater when it came to a head. But he was too late. When he came over the ridge that looked down on his ranch, he saw horses tied to the porch rail. The sheriff's horse. And another he did not recognize. No. He spurred his mount forward, covering the last mile at a gallop. By the time he reached the cabin, he could hear raised voices inside. Samuel burst through the door to find Clara standing in the middle of the room, Rosie clinging to her skirt. Sheriff Perkins stood awkwardly near the fireplace. And Jacob Hale leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smiling like a cat with a mouthful of feathers. Mr. Thornton. The sheriff tipped his hat. Sorry to intrude, but we have had some serious allegations made. Allegations. Samuel's hand dropped to the gun at his hip. What kind of allegations? Murder. Jacob stepped forward. This woman killed the stagecoach driver and the other passenger. I witnessed the whole thing. You lying piece of... Samuel. Clara's voice stopped him. Her face was pale but composed. Let the sheriff speak. Perkins cleared his throat. Mr. Miller here has provided documents, signed statements, a detailed account of what happened in that canyon. He shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I have to ask, did you cause that stagecoach to crash? No. Clara's voice did not waver. The crash was caused by an ambush. Someone shot the driver, someone who was not on the coach. Miller says he was on the coach. Says you attacked him when he tried to stop you from murdering the others. Then Miller is lying. Jacob laughed. Of course she says that. She is a husband killer. She lies as easily as she breathes. Shut your mouth. Samuel took a step toward him. Easy there. Perkins held up a hand. Nobody is getting violent here. He turned to Clara. Ma'am, given the seriousness of these allegations, I am going to have to ask you to come to town for questioning. Papa? Rosie's voice was small and frightened. What is happening? It is all right, little bird. Clara stroked the child's hair. The sheriff just wants to talk. I will be back soon. Clara. Samuel moved to her side, taking her hand. You do not have to go. He has no warrant. Actually, Perkins pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Judge Thompson signed this an hour ago. Warrant for the arrest of Clara Bennett on suspicion of murder. The world tilted. Samuel felt Clara's grip tighten on his hand. It will be all right, she said, though her voice trembled. I survived a trial before. I can survive another. You will not have to. Samuel faced the sheriff. This man is not who he claims. His real name is Jacob Hale. He is the brother of Clara's dead husband. He has been hunting her for 3 years. The stagecoach crash was his doing, not hers. Perkins frowned. That is a serious charge. Can you prove it? Not yet, Jacob answered smoothly, because it is not true. My name is Jacob Miller. I have papers to prove it. Forged papers. The only forgery here is the life this woman has been living. Jacob stepped closer to Clara. Sister-in-law. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. I told you that you would see me coming. Clara's face went white. She knows the truth. Jacob straightened, addressing the room. Look at her face, guilty as sin. Enough. Perkins moved between them. Miss Bennett, you will have to come with me. Mr. Thornton, you can visit her at the jail tomorrow. But right now I need everyone to stay calm. Samuel watched helplessly as the sheriff led Clara to his horse. She looked back once, meeting his eyes. "Find the old man," she said, "the one who helped me in the canyon. He saw everything." Then she was gone, riding toward Clearwater with her hands bound and Jacob Hale following close behind. Rosie burst into tears. Samuel gathered her close, his mind already racing through everything he knew. Jacob had made his move. But the game was not over yet. The Clearwater jail was a small building attached to the sheriff's office, with 2 cells made of iron bars and wooden floors. Clara sat on the narrow cot in the first cell, her splinted legs stretched out before her, and tried not to think about how close the walls felt. At least they had not put her in chains. That was something. Perkins brought her dinner at sunset. Plain food, nothing fancy, but hot and filling. He lingered by the bars, clearly uncomfortable. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am not sure I believe Miller's story. Something about the man does not sit right." "Then why arrest me?" "Because I have a warrant and documents and a respected citizen telling me you are a killer." Perkins sighed. "Look, I know Samuel Thornton, known him his whole life. He is a good judge of character. If he trusts you, that means something. But not enough to ignore a judge's order. I am sorry." He left, and Clara was alone with her thoughts. She had been here before. Not this exact cell, but one like it. After Daniel's death, waiting for her trial, 3 days in a Boston jail surrounded by whispers and accusations, certain she would hang. She had survived that. She could survive this. But last time she had been alone. This time she had Samuel. Rosie. A life waiting for her outside these walls. She had something to lose. That made it both better and worse. Samuel did not sleep that night. He rode to the canyon where Clara had been found, searching for any sign of the old native man who had helped her. Found nothing but empty wilderness. He rode to the wreck site, picking through the debris for evidence that Jacob had been part of the ambush. Found shell casings that could have come from any gun. He rode to every homestead within 20 miles, asking if anyone had seen anything, heard anything, knew anything. By dawn, he had nothing but exhaustion and a growing sense of despair. Back in Clearwater, he found Marshal Cole Winters waiting outside the jail. "Mr. Thornton." Winters tipped his hat. "Heard about your trouble." Samuel eyed him warily. "Come to make it worse?" "Actually, I came to help." Winters leaned against the hitching post, his weathered face unreadable. "Been watching that Miller fellow since he rode into town. Something about him has not been sitting right. So I did some checking. And his real name is Jacob Hale, brother of Daniel Hale, deceased of Boston." Winters pulled a telegram from his coat. "There are outstanding warrants for him in Texas. Assault, battery, threatened murder." Samuel's heart leaped. "Can you arrest him?" "Not directly." Winters grimaced. "Federal marshal, local matter. But I can make sure this information gets to the right people before any trial takes place. And I can testify that the woman I am hunting is not your bride. Different woman entirely." "You have been hunting someone else this whole time?" "Margaret Holloway. Killed at least 2 husbands for their money." Winters smiled grimly. "Your Clara is not the murdering type. Wrong bone structure. Then help me prove it." Samuel grabbed his arm. "Help me save her." Winters studied him for a long moment. "Got something in mind?" he asked. Samuel smiled for the first time in days. "I just might." The night before the trial, Clara had a visitor. She heard footsteps on the wooden floor and looked up to find Eleanor Price standing outside her cell. The older woman's face was a mask of conflicted emotions. "Mrs. Price." Clara's voice was flat. "Come to gloat?" "No." Eleanor's hands twisted together. "I came too. I do not know why I came. Perhaps to see the monster Jacob Miller described. Perhaps." Eleanor moved closer to the bars. "Or perhaps to see if you actually are one." They stared at each other in the lamplight. Two women on opposite sides of iron bars, opposite sides of everything that mattered. "He told me things about you," Eleanor said finally. "Terrible things. Said your husband was a good man. Said you killed him in cold blood. And you believed him." "I wanted to believe him." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Because Samuel chose you. And I wanted there to be a reason why he did not choose me." Clara should have felt anger. Instead, she felt only a tired kind of understanding. "Jacob Hale is Daniel Hale's brother," she said. "Daniel was my husband. And he was not a good man," Jacob said. "Jacob lied." Clara gripped the bars. "Daniel beat me for 3 years, Mrs. Price. Broke my bones. Knocked out my teeth. Made me lose 2 babies." She pulled down her collar, revealing the scar on her throat. "The night I killed him, he was strangling me to death. I grabbed the only thing within reach and I survived. That is all I did. I survived." Eleanor stared at the scar. Her face had gone pale. "I did not know." "No one knows." Clara's voice broke. "Because a woman who kills her husband is a monster. No matter the reason. That is what the world believes. That is what you believed." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "My husband beat me too." Clara went still. "For 10 years. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "He broke a bottle over my head on our wedding night. After that, it was just normal. I thought that was what marriage was. Mrs. Price, I wanted to kill him." Eleanor's voice was fierce now. "Every single day, I wanted to pick up a knife and end it. But I was too scared, too weak. And then he got consumption and died, and I was free. And I hated myself for being relieved." Clara reached through the bars and took Eleanor's hand. "That is not weakness," she said. "That is survival. That is, we do what we have to do. I helped Jacob." Eleanor's face crumbled. "I gave his papers to the sheriff. I told everyone you were a murderer. Because I was jealous and bitter and I wanted to believe the worst about you. I know. Can you forgive me?" Clara thought about the 3 days she had spent crawling through the desert, the years she had spent running, the lifetime of judgment and cruelty. "I do not know," she said honestly. "But I understand, and maybe that is a start." Eleanor wiped her eyes. "What can I do? To make it right?" Clara squeezed her hand. "Tell the truth," she said. "Whatever that costs you. Tell the truth." The trial was held in the Clearwater Church, the only building large enough to hold everyone who wanted to watch. Clara sat at a table near the front, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed. Samuel sat behind her with Rosie. Doc Wade was there, and the Hendersons, and what felt like half the town. Jacob Hale sat in the front row, smiling like he had already won. Judge Thompson called the proceedings to order and began hearing testimony. Jacob went first, spinning his web of lies with practiced ease. The crashed stagecoach, the vicious attack, the terrified flight of a man who had barely escaped with his life. Clara listened without expression. There was nothing she could say that would convince anyone who wanted to believe the worst. Then the judge called her to testify. She told her story simply. The real story. Daniel's abuse, her escape, Jacob's pursuit, the ambush in the canyon, the crawl through the desert. Lies, Jacob spat when she finished. Every word a lie. The judge called for order. "Do you have evidence to contradict her testimony, Mr. Miller?" "Only the word of an honest man against a proven killer." Jacob stood, his voice rising. "She murdered my brother. She murdered the men on that stagecoach. And now she is trying to murder my reputation to avoid justice." The crowd murmured. Clara felt despair rising in her chest. Then Samuel stood. I have a witness. The church went silent. Every head turned. Samuel stepped into the aisle. A witness who saw what really happened in that canyon. Someone who can prove Jacob Hale was not on the stagecoach when it crashed. The judge leaned forward. Bring this witness forward. The church doors opened. The old native man walked in, his silver braids catching the light from the windows. Behind him came Marshal Cole Winters, badge gleaming on his chest. This man, Samuel said, found Clara Bennett in the canyon the day after the crash. He gave her water and food. He saw which direction she came from. And he saw something else. The old man spoke slowly in English, his words careful and clear. I saw a man, on a horse, riding around the canyon before the crash, not in the coach. Around it. He pointed at Jacob. That man, he was not on the coach. He was waiting. Jacob shot to his feet. This is absurd. You are going to take the word of A. Cole Winters stepped forward. I would think carefully about the next word out of your mouth, Mr. Hale. He held up a telegram. I have here confirmation that Jacob Miller does not exist. Jacob Hale does, and Jacob Hale has outstanding warrants in Texas for assault and criminal threatening. This is... Furthermore, Winters turned to address the judge. I have been investigating Mr. Hale since he arrived in Clearwater. His story does not hold water. He claims to have been on the stagecoach, but he had no injuries consistent with such a crash. He claims to be a bounty hunter but has no official papers. And his vendetta against Mrs. Thornton is well documented. Mrs. Thornton? The judge raised an eyebrow. Samuel stepped forward. We were married yesterday, Your Honor, by Reverend Gray, with Doc Wade and Mrs. Henderson as witnesses. Clara is my wife. A gasp ran through the crowd. Jacob's face contorted with rage. This changes nothing. Changes. He took a step toward Clara. She killed my brother. She. I have one more witness, Samuel interrupted. He looked toward the back of the church. Mrs. Price? Eleanor stood on trembling legs. Every eye turned to her. Mr. Hale. She could not look at Jacob. He came to me, told me about Clara's past, gave me documents to show the sheriff. She swallowed hard. But last night he came to me again, drunk, bragging about how his plan was working. He told me he caused the stagecoach crash himself, shot the driver from a ridge above the canyon, said he wanted Clara to suffer before he killed her. You lying witch! Jacob lunged for Eleanor. Samuel was faster. The two men crashed together in the center of the church, fists flying. The crowd scattered, women screaming, men shouting. Clara watched as Samuel took a blow to the jaw, staggered, then came back with a right hook that sent Jacob reeling. Jacob pulled a knife. If I cannot kill her, he snarled, I will settle for you. Will? Clara did not think. She grabbed the sheriff's cane from where it leaned against the pew and threw it toward Samuel. Samuel caught it, deflected Jacob's thrust, and brought the cane down hard on his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Before Jacob could recover, Samuel had him pinned, knee in his back, arm twisted behind him. It is over, Samuel said. You are done. Marshal Winters stepped in, clapping irons on Jacob's wrists. Jacob Hale, you are under arrest for attempted murder, assault, perjury, and outstanding warrants in the state of Texas. He hauled Jacob to his feet. You will be tried, and you will hang. Jacob's eyes found Clara's across the chaos. This is not over, he said. You hear me? This is not. Yes, it is. Clara's voice was calm. Goodbye, Jacob. The marshal dragged him away. The judge banged his gavel until order was restored. Given the testimony presented today, he announced, all charges against Clara Thornton are dismissed. This court apologizes for the injustice she has suffered. Clara stood on shaking legs. Samuel was at her side in an instant, his arms going around her. It is over, he said against her hair. You are free. Clara buried her face in his chest and wept. 1 year later, spring came to Wyoming like a blessing. Clara Thornton stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the morning sun paint the valley in shades of gold and green. Her right leg still ached when it rained, and she walked with a noticeable limp, but she walked. That was more than Doc Wade had predicted. Behind her, through the open door, she could hear Rosie practicing scales on Mary's piano. The child had taken to music with surprising passion, her small fingers growing more confident with each passing week. "Coffee?" Samuel appeared beside her, 2 steaming cups in his hands. "Please." Clara took one and leaned against him. "Beautiful morning. Every morning is beautiful lately." Samuel kissed her temple. "You make it that way." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching a hawk circle over the far ridge. Much had changed in the years since Jacob's arrest. The trial in Texas had been swift and decisive. Jacob Hale had hanged 3 months ago for the murder of the stagecoach driver and drummer, as well as a string of other crimes that came to light during the investigation. Clara had not attended the execution. She did not need to. The moment Jacob was led from the Clearwater Church in chains, she had let him go. Eleanor Price had left town shortly after the trial, unable to face the whispers and sidelong glances. Clara had heard she was in Denver now, working with a women's charitable organization. Maybe someday they would meet again. Maybe not. Either way, Clara wished her well. Marshall Winters had eventually found his quarry, the real Margaret Holloway, hiding out in a mining camp near Virginia City. He had stopped by the ranch on his way back east to let Clara know. She had thanked him for his help. He had tipped his hat and ridden away, a man with debts paid and a clear conscience. And Clara herself? She had found something she never expected to find. Peace. The school had been her idea. Clearwater had no proper teacher, and a generation of children was growing up barely able to read their own names. Clara had proposed opening a small school in the church, 3 days a week, free to any child who wanted to learn. The town council had been skeptical at first. A woman with her past, teaching their children? But Samuel had spoken in her favor, and Doc Wade, and even the Hendersons. And when Clara stood before them and explained her vision, her voice calm and confident, the council had agreed. Now, 8 students gathered in the church every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and what Clara called thinking for yourself. Rosie was the youngest. The oldest was 16, a ranch hand's son who had never read a book in his life. Mrs. Thornton, one of the children, had asked last week, "Were you scared when you were alone in the desert?" Clara had thought about the question for a long moment. "Yes," she had said. "I was terrified, but I was more scared of giving up than I was of dying, so I kept crawling." The child had nodded solemnly, as if this was the most important lesson Clara had ever taught. Maybe it was. That evening, Clara walked alone to the small cemetery behind the ranch house. Mary's grave was simple, a wooden marker with her name and dates, surrounded by wildflowers that Clara had planted in the spring. Thomas rested beside her, his marker even smaller. Clara knelt and placed a fresh bunch of yellow flowers against Mary's headstone. "I never knew you," she said softly, "but I love the people you left behind." The wind stirred the grass around her, carrying the scent of sage and wild roses. "I am not trying to replace you. I know I never could, but I promise you I will love them the best I can. Both of them, for as long as I live." She stood, wiping dirt from her knees, and turned to find Samuel watching from the path. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." He moved to stand beside her, looking down at Mary's grave. "She would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so." Samuel took her hand. She was gentle, but she was stronger than anyone knew. Kept fighting long past when most people would have given up. "Like me?" "Like you." He pulled her close. "You are more alike than you know." They stood together as the sun sank toward the western hills, 3 people in the quiet of the evening, 2 living and 1 remembered. "I used to be angry at her," Samuel admitted, "for leaving, for not telling me how bad it was, for making me find her in that barn. And now I understand." He was quiet for a moment. She was drowning, and I did not see it. I was too busy, too focused on the ranch and the cattle and all the things I thought were important. When she reached out that last night, I was not there. You could not have known. Maybe not. Maybe there was nothing I could have done. But I will never know for sure. Samuel turned to face her. That is why I searched for you when the stagecoach went missing. That is why I kept looking when everyone said there was no point. You did not want to make the same mistake twice. I could not let another woman I loved face the darkness alone. Samuel's eyes were wet. Even if I did not know you yet, even if you were just a name on a letter, you deserved someone who would not give up. Clara reached up to touch his face. You found me, and I will keep finding you. Samuel kissed her forehead, every day, for the rest of our lives. That night they lay on the hillside behind the cabin, watching stars wheel overhead. Sometimes I still dream about the desert, Clara said, about crawling through the dirt with my legs broken. Is it frightening? No. She smiled in the darkness. In the dream, I know you're coming. I know you will find me. So I just keep crawling. Samuel's hand found hers. I will always find you, he said, no matter where you are. Clara closed her eyes, listening to the Wyoming wind, feeling Samuel's heartbeat steady beside her. Rosie was asleep in the cabin. Biscuit the dog curled at her feet. The piano that had been silent for 3 years was full of music again. She thought about everything she had survived. Daniel's fists, Jacob's hunt, 3 days crawling through hell with nothing but a promise to keep her moving. She thought about the letters she had written, full of hope she was afraid to feel. The man who had answered them, the child who called her mama. They said the mail-order bride never arrived, but she had arrived. Not on the stagecoach, not on the schedule, not in the way anyone expected. She had crawled through fire and come out the other side, and she was finally home. 5 years later, the Thornton Ranch was a different place. The original cabin had grown, new rooms added to accommodate a family that kept expanding. There was a proper kitchen now, with a wood stove that actually worked, a parlor where Mary's piano stood polished and tuned, bedrooms enough for everyone. Clara stood at the window of the parlor, watching the autumn sun set over the valley. Her cane leaned against the wall beside her, rarely needed these days, but always close at hand. Some things you never completely left behind. Mama? A small voice tugged at her skirt. Clara looked down at her son. Thomas Samuel Thornton, named for the brother Rosie had lost and the man who had saved Clara's life, was 3 years old and had his father's green eyes. Yes, sweetheart? Rosie says dinner is ready. Then we should not keep her waiting. Clara scooped Thomas into her arms and carried him toward the kitchen, where the smell of roast chicken filled the air. Rosie, at 13, had grown into a capable young woman. She had Clara's love of books and Samuel's stubborn determination, and she ran the household with an efficiency that would have impressed a cavalry sergeant. I made your recipe, she said as Clara entered. The one from your mother's cookbook. It smells wonderful. Clara set Thomas in his chair and kissed Rosie's forehead. Where is your father? Coming. Samuel appeared in the doorway, dust on his boots and hay in his hair. Sorry, lost track of time with the new folds. Wash up. Clara smiled at him. Dinner is waiting. They gathered around the table. 4 Thorntons now instead of 2. And Samuel said grace the way he did every evening. Thanks for the food, the family, the life they had built from the ashes of their pasts. Clara looked around the table at the faces she loved. Her husband, weathered and strong, still looking at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Her daughter, because Rosie was her daughter now in every way that mattered, growing into the woman she was meant to become. Her son, born in this valley, who would never know hunger or fear or the weight of secrets too heavy for small shoulders. This was what she had crawled through the desert for. This family, this life, this belonging. After dinner, Clara played the piano while Rosie helped Thomas with his letters. Samuel sat in his chair by the fire, whittling something from a piece of cedar, the way he did every evening when the day's work was done. Play Mama's song, Thomas demanded. Clara smiled and began the melody that Rosie had learned from the old sheet music, the song Mary used to play on long-ago evenings before darkness took her. The notes filled the cabin, sweet and sad and somehow hopeful, a bridge between the past and the present. When the song ended, Samuel set down his whittling. "Come sit with me," he said. Clara crossed to him, settling into the chair beside his. He took her hand the way he always did, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm. "Happy?" he asked. Clara thought about the question. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago, broken in body and spirit, crawling through a desert, because it was better than giving up. She thought about the letters that had started everything. 2 lonely people reaching across the emptiness to find each other. She thought about all the things she had never expected to have. Love, family, a home where she was wanted for who she was, not what she could do. "Yes," she said. "Happy." Samuel smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Good." They sat together as the fire crackled, and Rosie taught Thomas the sounds of the alphabet. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, carrying the last warmth of autumn toward the coming winter. Clara closed her eyes and let the peace wash over her. They said some promises were written in blood before they were spoken aloud. But other promises were written in survival, in the choice to keep going when everything said stop, in the decision to trust again when trust had been betrayed. Clara Bennett had made a promise to a man she had never met. She had sealed it in blood and crawl and sheer stubborn refusal to die. And Samuel Thornton had kept a promise too, to search beyond hope, to love beyond fear, to build something beautiful from the wreckage of what came before. They had found each other in the wilderness, 2 broken people with their broken pasts, and they had chosen to be whole together. That was what belonging meant. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of someone who saw them and stayed anyway. Not the end of fear, but the beginning of courage strong enough to face it. Not perfection, but partnership. Not fairy tale, but better. Real. Clara opened her eyes and looked at her family, gathered in the golden light of the fire, and felt her heart overflow. They called me a killer, she thought. They said I did not deserve to be loved. They said the mail-order bride never arrived. But I arrived. I crawled through hell to get here, and I am never leaving. She squeezed Samuel's hand, and he squeezed back. And that was all that needed to be said. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Inside, a family was home. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.